I've lived on the same street for 11 years. I know every house, every neighbor, every car that belongs on this road. When something does not belong, I notice it. That is just what 11 years of familiarity does to a person. Your brain builds a map of normal, and it alarms when something falls outside it. The first time I saw him was a Tuesday evening in September. I was taking the bins out just after dark, and there was a man standing at the end of the street near the junction. Just standing there, facing up the road, facing my direction. He was far enough away that I could not make out his face clearly. Just a shape. Dark jacket, hands at his sides, standing completely still. I took the bins out and went back inside. People stand on street corners. It is not unusual. I thought nothing of it. The second time was Thursday of the same week. I was coming home from a late supermarket run, driving up my street at about 9 at night. My headlights swept across the junction at the end of the road, and he was there again. Same spot, same stillness. I drove past him slowly. He did not turn to look at my car. He just stood there facing up the street. I told my husband about it that night. He said it was probably someone who walked there every evening. A habit. Some people have unusual habits. I agreed and went to sleep. The third time I started keeping a record. Over the following 3 weeks, I saw him 11 times. Always at the end of the street, always after dark, always between 8 and 10 in the evening, always completely still. I started paying attention to details. He was always in the same dark jacket. He never had a phone in his hand, no screen glow in the dark. He never smoked. He never had a dog. He was not waiting for anyone that I could ever identify because no one ever came to meet him. He just stood. And then, at some point, I never caught the moment he left. He was gone. My husband drove down to the junction one evening when the man was there. Drove past him slowly. The man did not react, did not look at the car. My husband said he was in his 50s, ordinary looking, nothing remarkable about him except the absolute stillness. We called the non-emergency police line. They said that standing on a public street was not an offense. They took a note of our concern and said they would increase patrols in the area. He appeared 3 more times after that. Then on the 15th night of my record, a Wednesday, cold and clear, I looked out of my bedroom window just before I closed the curtains and saw that he had moved. He was no longer at the end of the street. He was standing directly outside my house. I called the police immediately. Not the non-emergency line this time. I called 999. I stood at the side of my bedroom window where I could see him, but he could not see me, and I watched him while I waited. He did not move. He stood on the pavement directly in front of my house for 7 minutes, not looking up at the windows, not looking at the door, just standing there, facing the house, like he was absorbing it. The police arrived in 8 minutes. He was gone when they pulled into the street. They searched the area and found nothing. They took a full statement this time and opened a formal record. He came back twice more after that night, always at the end of the street, never directly outside again, as if the police visit had recalibrated something, pushed him back to the safe distance. Then he stopped coming entirely. 8 weeks after I first saw him, he simply stopped. The police never identified him. We never found out why he chose our street. We never found out what he was waiting for. My husband says he moved on, found somewhere else to stand. I cannot decide if that makes it better or worse. I started a new job in January 3 years ago. Mid-sized company, open plan office. The kind of place where you get to know your colleagues quickly, whether you want to or not. Within the first 2 weeks, I had learned who made the coffee too strong, who microwaved fish at lunch, who would talk for 40 minutes if you made the mistake of asking how their weekend was. And I had gotten to know Daniel. Daniel had been at the company for 2 years when I arrived. He sat 2 desks from mine. Early 30s, friendly, dry sense of humor, the kind of person who made the day go faster. We fell into an easy work friendship, lunched together a few times a week, the occasional after-work drink with a broader team. Nothing intense, just the comfortable rhythm of spending 8 hours a day in proximity to someone you get along with. He talked about his life the way most people do, casually and in passing. He had grown up in the North. He had studied engineering but ended up in project management. He had a sister. He ran half marathons. He had a flat on the other side of the city that he was slowly doing up. I had no reason to question any of it. The first thing that felt wrong was small. So small, I dismissed it immediately. He mentioned his sister, said she had just had a baby. I asked her name. He paused for just a fraction of a second before answering. Less than a second. The kind of pause you would never notice if you were not paying close attention. I was not paying close attention. I moved on. 4 months into working together, I ran into him at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, on the other side of the city from where he had told me he lived. I mentioned it, said I did not know he came to this area. He said he was visiting a friend nearby. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. Different coffee shop, same area. This one was 3 streets from my flat. I had never told him where I lived beyond the general neighborhood. I mentioned it again. He said the same thing. Visiting a friend. I did not say anything else, but something had shifted. Some quiet part of my brain had started keeping score. I mentioned the half marathons one day, asked which ones he had run. He listed 3 races. That evening, I looked them up. The first 2 existed. The third did not. Not that year. Not any year. I searched his name on social media. Nothing. Not unusual. Some people are not on social media. I searched the engineering university he said he had attended, the years he said he had been there. The alumni records were public. His name was not there. I sat with my laptop open for a long time. Then I did something I am not entirely sure I should have done. I hired a background check service, the kind anyone can access online. I put in his name, his approximate age, the city he said he was from. The name came back clean. No criminal record, no county court judgments, nothing concerning. But the details did not match. The address history did not align with what he had told me. The employment history was different. And the age was wrong, not by a year or 2, by 11 years. I went to HR. I did not know what I was reporting exactly. I had no evidence of anything illegal. I just presented the inconsistencies and said I was concerned. HR took it more seriously than I expected. They conducted their own checks. They came back to me 3 days later and told me that the man I knew as Daniel had applied for the job using a fabricated CV and a name that was not his own. His real name was different. His real age was different. His real background was different from everything he had told everyone in that office for over 2 years. He was let go immediately. The police were involved because the fabricated identity had been used to obtain employment fraudulently. During the investigation, it emerged that he had done the same thing at 2 previous companies. Always a similar role, always a similar persona, always the same gradual building of trust with specific colleagues. Always colleagues who lived alone. The investigators never established definitively what his end goal was. He was cooperative, but vague. He said he just wanted a fresh start, a new life. He seemed to genuinely not understand why what he had done was wrong. I think about the coffee shop sometimes. The 2 times I saw him near my flat, the neighborhood he had no reason to be in. And I think about how long he had been building that picture of me without me knowing. How much he knew about my routine, my neighborhood, my life. All gathered quietly over 4 months of lunches and casual conversation. I was careful about what I shared after that. Much more careful. About everything. With everyone. I booked the Airbnb for a long weekend alone. Not unusual for me. I travel solo regularly, and I've always found it more restorative than going with other people. You set your own pace. You eat when you want. You do not have to perform contentment when you're not feeling it. The property was a converted barn in the countryside. 2 hours from home, sleeps 4. Available because I was the only guest. The host had superhost status and over 200 5-star reviews. I read every concern I could find in the lower-rated ones. Nothing alarming. A broken dishwasher one time. A slow response to a maintenance request. Standard stuff. I arrived on a Friday evening. The host was not there. Key in a lockbox, welcome note on the kitchen counter, a bottle of wine with a handwritten card. I poured a glass, walked through the property, felt myself decompress for the first time in weeks. The barn was beautiful. Stone walls, exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto fields. Completely private. No neighboring properties visible. I went to bed at 10. Slept better than I had in months. Saturday was perfect. I walked, I read, I cooked a proper meal for the first time in weeks. By Saturday evening, I had almost forgotten I owned a phone. Then at 11:30, I heard the door. Not the front door. The back door, a utility entrance at the rear of the barn that opened onto a small courtyard. The specific sound of a door being unlocked carefully. The handle turning. The door opening slowly. I was on the sofa reading. I went completely still. Footsteps in the utility room. Slow and careful. Someone moving through the space with the deliberateness of someone who did not want to make noise, but knew the layout well enough to navigate it without light. I picked up my phone and moved silently to the far end of the barn, away from the utility room. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped the phone once on the stone floor. The footsteps stopped. A long silence. Then they started again, slower this time. I called 999 from behind the sofa with a cushion pressed against my mouth so my voice would not carry. I whispered that someone had entered the property, and I was inside and alone. The footsteps reached the kitchen. I heard a drawer open, the specific slide and rattle of a kitchen drawer. Then it closed. Then silence. For 12 minutes, I lay behind that sofa not moving while the police drove toward me across country roads in the dark. 12 minutes of complete silence from the direction of the kitchen. Not leaving, not moving, just silence. The police arrived, and I heard them at the front door, and I called out, and the room exploded into torchlight and voices. They found him in the utility room. He had retreated back there when he heard the police arrive. He was sitting on the floor against the wall with his knees pulled up, calm in the way someone is calm when they have made peace with being caught. He was not a random intruder. He was not a burglar. He was a man who had been using the Airbnb platform to identify properties that were booked by solo guests, specifically women traveling alone. and would let himself in during the evening using a key he had copied from the lockbox code that hosts often left unchanged for months. He had done this at 6 other properties. The police established this from his phone, photographs taken inside the properties, notes about the guests, their cars, their routines during their stay. The kitchen drawer he had opened contained cutlery. The police showed me the photograph on his phone from that night. A photograph of me asleep on the sofa earlier that evening, taken through the floor-to-ceiling window from outside in the dark. He had been outside watching before he came in. He had watched me fall asleep. Then, he had used his key. I do not stay in self-catering properties alone anymore. I know that is letting it win. I know that is exactly the kind of response that these people count on. That fear contracts your world. I know all of that. But I also know what it felt like to lie behind that sofa in the dark, listening to a drawer open in the kitchen. And some knowledge changes you permanently. I got the message on a Thursday afternoon. It came into my phone's messaging app from a number I did not recognize. No name attached, just a number. The message said, "She just left for the gym. Blue bag. Same time as last week." I read it 3 times. Then I replied, "I think you have the wrong number." The response came back in under 30 seconds. It said, "Delete this. Do not reply again." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time looking at those 2 messages. She just left for the gym. Blue bag. Same time as last week. Someone had sent a surveillance update to the wrong number. Someone was watching a woman, tracking her movements, her routine, her bag, and reporting it to someone else. And they had mistyped the recipient's number and sent it to me instead. I called the police that afternoon. They took the report seriously. They asked me to preserve the messages and not delete anything. Then they asked me a question that made me feel cold all over. They asked, "Are you certain the message was not intended for you?" I had dismissed that possibility immediately when I received the message. Of course, it was not about me. I did not know anyone who would be tracking my movements. I did not have enemies. I was a completely ordinary person living a completely ordinary life. But the police officer's question stayed with me. She just left for the gym. Blue bag, same time as last week. I thought about my own routine. I went to the gym. I had a blue gym bag, a specific shade of blue, distinctive enough that someone who knew me would describe it as blue rather than any other color. I went on Thursdays. I went at the same time most weeks because my schedule was consistent. I called the police back 2 hours after the first call. I told them I was not certain anymore. They came to my house that evening. We went through everything together. The timing of the message, sent at 4:17 p.m. on a Thursday. I left for the gym at 4:15 p.m. on Thursdays. The blue bag. My blue bag. The officer asked if I had noticed anyone unusual near my home recently. Anyone who seemed to appear in multiple locations. Any cars parked near my house that did not belong. I had not noticed anything. But I had not been looking. That night, I went through every photograph on my phone from the previous 2 months. Every photo I had taken on walks, at the gym, on my street. Looking for a face that appeared more than once in the background. Looking for a car. I found nothing conclusive. But in 3 separate photos taken on 3 different days near my house, there was a dark blue car parked on the opposite side of the road. I could not see the driver. I could not read the plate clearly in any of the photos. The same car. 3 different days. Outside my house. The police traced the number the message had come from. It was a burner, a cheap pay-as-you-go with no registration. Untraceable beyond the cell tower it had connected to when the message was sent. The cell tower covered a radius that included my street. The message had been sent from within range of my own home, which meant whoever sent it had been near my house at 4:17 p.m. on a Thursday, watching me leave for the gym. The investigation continued for 6 weeks. The dark blue car was identified from council CCTV footage. It had been parked near my house on 9 separate occasions over 3 months. The registered owner was a man who had no obvious connection to me. When police spoke to him, he denied all knowledge. There was insufficient evidence to charge him. The messages never came again. The car never appeared again after the police visit. I changed my gym schedule. I changed my route. I varied everything I could vary. But I still think about the message sometimes. About the number it was meant for. About whoever was supposed to receive that update and did not. About what they planned to do with the information that she had just left for the gym with her blue bag at the same time as last week. And I think about how close I came to never knowing any of it. How, if they had typed one digit correctly, I would have gone to the gym and come home and gone to bed and had no idea. The only reason I found out was a single wrong digit in a phone number. One digit. My wife and I went to Portugal last summer. 10 days. The kind of holiday we had been promising ourselves for 2 years. Proper rest, no laptops, no work calls, actual disconnection. We stayed in a small coastal town, rented an apartment, spent our days between the beach and the local restaurants. It was exactly what we needed. We took a lot of photographs. My wife more than me. She has always documented everything visually, the way some people keep a diary. By the time we flew home, she had over 400 photos on her phone. Sunsets, food, the apartment, the beach. Candid shots of me looking sun-dazed at outdoor tables. We did not look through them properly until we got home. The first night back, we sat on the sofa with a glass of wine and went through them together on her phone. The way you do after a good holiday, reliving it before real life reasserts itself. About halfway through, she stopped scrolling. She said, "Who is that?" In the background of a beach photograph, a wide shot of the shoreline she had taken on day 3, there was a man, standing in the shallows at the water's edge, facing the beach, facing us. Far enough back to be out of focus, but clearly visible, clearly watching. I said I had no idea. A tourist, probably. The beach was public. She kept scrolling. She found him again in a photo taken at a restaurant on day 4. Sitting 2 tables behind me at an outdoor terrace, face slightly turned away. But the shirt was the same. A specific dark red shirt that was distinctive enough to identify, even at a distance. Same man, different day, different location. We went back to the beginning and looked at every photograph with different eyes. He was in 11 photographs. 11 separate images across 10 days in 3 different locations. The beach, 2 different restaurants. The market we visited on day 6. The viewpoint at the top of the hill we walked to on day 8. Always in the background. Always positioned just far enough away to be deniable. This is a public place. People share spaces. Coincidences happen. But the accumulation of 11 photographs across 10 days was not coincidence. Could not be coincidence. He had been following us, or following her, through our entire holiday. I went cold in a way that the Portuguese summer could not touch. We reported it to the local police through an interpreter app. They were thorough and took it seriously. They reviewed CCTV from the restaurants and the market. They identified the man. He was a British tourist who had been staying in the same town. The local police contacted the British authorities. An investigation was opened. When the man's devices were examined, they found photographs on his phone. Photographs of my wife, taken over the 10 days of our holiday. Close-range photographs taken with a long lens that we had never once noticed. Photographs of her on the beach, at the restaurants, walking through the market, going into our apartment building. Over 200 photographs of my wife, taken without her knowledge over 10 days while I sat beside her completely unaware. But the detail that I cannot get out of my head, the detail that made the investigating officer pause before he told us, the detail I have thought about every single day since. The man's flight to Portugal had departed the day after we booked ours. He had not been in the same town by coincidence. He had not targeted us randomly on holiday. He had known we were going. Someone in our lives, someone with access to our travel plans, our booking confirmation, our itinerary, had told him where we were going and when. The investigation eventually identified who that person was. I am not going to say who it was because they know who they are and they will know I am talking about them if this story finds them. What I will say is that it was someone we trusted completely. Someone who had been in our home. Someone who had sat at our table and eaten our food and smiled at our photographs. I have not spoken to them since. And I have not posted our travel plans on social media since. Not a single word. Not a hint. Not a location tag after the fact. Because now I know that somewhere in the overlap between the people you trust and the people who wish you harm, there is not always a visible line. If any of these stories reminded you of something that happened to you, something you dismissed, something you explained away, something that never quite sat right, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment below, or send me your story at the email in the description. Every story on this channel came from someone who needed to be heard. Your story might be next. If you are new here, welcome to Mr. SHM. Subscribe for new true horror stories every single week. Check who has access to your travel plans. Check who knows your routine. Check your holiday photographs. And I will see you in the next one.